thank you for the great turnout. With that, I think I will begin, and you, as I remember now, that you have opening for both. So first of all, tonight we have Brad Thurman and Mark Nelson, both candidates for Cowlitz County Sheriff. First up, Brad Thurman.
Well, thank you.
For future reference, we prefer less applause to give them the opportunity to speak, but I didn't say that, so go ahead.
Well, I'd like to thank Ken Bottero and Mark Kelsch for hosting these forums, and for the Canterbury Park here for hosting us here tonight, and for all of you for coming. Very good crowd. I'm going to start out with, I want to just introduce myself during this introduction. Many of you probably don't know me, but my name is Brad Thurman, and I've lived in Cowlitz County for 40 years, and I've served in the Sheriff's Office. It'll be 31 years as of October 1st coming up here. So my education, I went to R.A. Long, graduated in 1981, went on to LCC, and then Portland State University, and graduated from Portland State in 87. And that same year, a few months later, I went to work for the Sheriff's Office. And during my 31 years with the Sheriff's Office, I've served in a number of capacities. Started out as a patrol deputy for the first 5 years, and then for 2 years I was in the Drug Task Force at that time, and they got to have long hair and drive around in like a lowrider Monte Carlo, and had some fun. Doing that in many ways is very enjoyable, very educational, to actually different type of work, being undercover and working the street. From that time period, I went on back to patrol and took on more duties as a field training officer, training new officers who were coming on the force. Also started taking supervisory responsibility on a temporary basis, and then was promoted to sergeant in 1999, and I've been a patrol sergeant for about 13 years, and I've served 5.5 years as a detective sergeant, ending at the end of last year. I rotated out, and during that time investigated serious felonies, including multiple homicides, in custody deaths, a lot of unfortunately in our community there's a lot of child sex cases, and that was the majority of the work that we did in there, unfortunately. But I've had that experience, and now I'm back as a patrol sergeant once again. I've also, as a sideline, we have an in-house union. It's called the Cowlitz County Deputies and Sergeants Guild, which are my co-workers, and I've served in pretty much since we formed that guild back in the mid-90s. I've served in some capacity as either a committee member, vice president, or president of the union, so I've had a lot of exposure to union issues, and also as part of my detective duties, I've done background investigations on upcoming or incoming officers and that sort of thing. So I just want to close and say I appreciate you coming, and look forward to the questions you have. And Ken, I think, it's cutting me down to about 30 seconds, so I'll cut it off there, and so we can move along.
Thank you. Opening statement, Mr. Nelson.
Well, good evening. Thank you all for being here out in the hallway. I greatly appreciate you being here. Again, thank you to Mr. Bottero and Mr. Kelsch for hosting this and having us here. I am Sheriff Mark Nelson. I am here to ask for your support and your vote, and to answer whatever questions may come along. A lot of you do know me, but I'm going to run across a few facts for you here. I was born and raised here in Cowlitz County. This is my home and has been my entire life. Graduated from Mark Morris High School and Lower Columbia College. I raised my family here. My family is all here. Of course, many of you know my folks. My brother, brother both spent their careers in law enforcement here. My wife and I are going to be celebrating our 40th wedding anniversary coming up here in a couple of weeks, so kind of excited about that. And I've got 2 children, 3 grandchildren, all of them here. This is our home. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, protector of the rights of people, have been my entire career. I have over 40 years of law enforcement experience, starting off as a reserve deputy, and then as a commissioned officer. I've served in patrol, in our services division, where I did firearms instruction, search and rescue, Marine patrol, all of those things. Was promoted to sergeant, detective sergeant, and then became the captain of the patrol division, where I served until received initially the appointment to sheriff in 2009. I've twice been elected. I've worked hard to earn the trust of the people of this community, and have twice been elected as their sheriff. The sheriff's job is more than just law enforcement. It is the chief executive officer and conservator of the peace of the county, according to RCW. That is accomplished through many things, a lot of which is engagement within the community. And I think most of you know I'm very, very engaged in our community. That's what brings about the community health and the quality of place that Cowlitz County is and longs to be, and we all know that. That's what we all desire. My emphasis is drug issues, school security, the 911 transition. Those things are all very, very important to me. I'm a graduate of the Lower Columbia Leadership Academy, the Northwest Law Enforcement Command College, National Sheriff's Institute, and again, thank you for being here, and I'm here to ask for your support and your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. First question will be directed to Mr. Thurman, and both will receive the same question. I should also note, I think Ken mentioned at the beginning, we have cards at the back. If you'd like to fill out one of the 3x5 cards, then Ken can bring them up here. We have quite a few already to go through, but you're more than welcome to put a question forward. First question to Mr. Thurman. How would you describe the Sheriff's Office interaction with other law enforcement and emergency response agencies in Cowlitz County? Do you see opportunities for improvement?
Well, thank you. Well, yes, I do. There's two aspects to that. There's the line interaction between deputy sheriffs and police officers out on the street, and that occurs on a daily basis, and I think there's a good working relationship there. I think the issue comes into play is at the higher levels, the administration between various agencies. It's part of my exploring whether to run or not. I did talk to numerous heads of local law enforcement agencies, public safety agencies, and also some elected officials, and many of them expressed concern about the direction and leadership of the Sheriff's Office. That was part of the reason that I chose to run. So I do believe that at the higher levels that we could be doing better. We could work better with other law enforcement agencies, especially in a joint direction, in joint operations. Some of the things that have been gone on for many years seem to be doing well, like the SWAT team, Citizens Academy, and those type of things. Things have been in place for a number of years, seem to be going quite well. However, in terms of new innovations to address issues in the law enforcement community, there's many more areas that we need to address. I think that could be done. One is like a firing range. There was an issue, potential on the table for us to have a joint firing range that fell through for a number of reasons, and it's unfortunate due to the fact that our firing range is, we have limited access to it many times of the year, and it's not real high tech. I would like, one thing, for example, is to coordinate with other agencies to have some simulated digital training that you can use year-round. In our weather situation here in Cowlitz County with rain and whatnot, it's hard to really train outside all the time. There are digital platforms that you can use that simulate officer-involved shooting issues, and that's one of the big liability issues for law enforcement is use of force. So there are many applications of technology out there that we could use and employ to make sure our officers are better trained. There's also the issue of cybercrime, which we're working on, getting the capability to do that, but there are many things we could be doing better if we work collectively together as agencies to address computer crime. It takes a long time to get the computer analyzed nowadays and get the turnaround done on that. And it's kind of, computers affect as we know in our lives, infiltrated every aspect of our life, and the same thing with law enforcement. We use them every day, and criminals have too. I would never guess 20 years ago that criminals would have been able to use computers like they have to perpetrate crime like they do. However, they seem to be one step ahead of us, and that's an area where I think we could work jointly together to have a cybercrimes unit like Vancouver. We rely on them somewhat. They have an in-house unit, and we could very easily use that type of unit to help address computer crime. And Ken says I am done. So thank you.
Mr. Nelson, same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, that's fine. I think I've got that. So the interaction with other agencies in the community has always been good. At a line level, we've always taken care of each other, and that's the important thing. just examples. I mean, we just last night pursued assist from another agency there to help out. All of those things go on. Public safety is first and foremost important at all levels of law enforcement. As far as the management goes, we meet regularly. The chiefs and I meet on a regular basis. We still talk on a regular basis, and we have monthly meetings, and we discuss law enforcement issues and the things that are important to each of us as an agency and collectively. So those things are still in place. They're still happening. Talk about some of the things that my opponent talked about some of the things that such as the firing range and those things. We've had communication about those issues. Those things are ongoing. They don't happen immediately. Things, we've talked about coordination with training for many years. In fact, we do share our training information with the other agencies and allow them to participate. That happens more frequently, and that's something that I have encouraged. The things that are important to me, and here's the fact of the matter, is that issues that are important to us as a community, such as the drug issues, the homeless issues, those are things that we discuss. The drug task force continues to be a priority for us, and that is made up. It is an interagency. It's an interagency organization. Although we've had some agencies that have left and are working their own areas, we continue to support the drug task force. That continues to be a primary effort of mine. Another is, of course, our radio system. We continue to work on that together. Recently, we're in the middle of the 911 transition to the 911 Public Authority. I serve on the board of that, and that is something that I think in the end is going to be a benefit for the citizens of Cowlitz County and law enforcement in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thurman, would you care to rebut or add any additional comments?
I don't think so, no. Let's go on to the next question.
We will do so. One of the things when we have evenings with a lot of questions, there's opportunities to combine questions. So I'm going to read two questions, but consider them basically the same topic. This will be directed first at Mr. Nelson. What are your priorities for the Sheriff's Department budget? Where will you cut? Where will you add? Under current budget circumstances, how can you put more deputies on the road? Please be more specific.
As far as the budget in areas which I would cut, currently our budget is at $6.5 million. That's the Sheriff's Office budget. Out of that, I have about $300,000 that is discretionary monies. In other words, that's not already established for interagency or intergovernmental or labor, all of those fixed put in costs. So there's a very, very small portion of the sheriff's budget that I actually have discretionary control over. What I would do as far as cutting those things, I scratch for every dime we can get. I go to the board and make requests for every line item, requests for personnel every year. I have gone in and made those requests. A lot of the things that the deputies look for or ask for during the year, things that come up that are needed, updates, stop sticks, for instance, or forensic, computer forensic tools that can be used in investigations. Those are things that we present to the board for our budget and ask to receive those. Generally, we're fairly successful. Where we've not been successful has been with personnel. So as far as things that I would cut, I'm not looking to cut anything. You can arrange and rearrange. You can cut a pie into a number of different shapes, but you still just cut one pie. So the amount of dollars that we get to, the amount of dollars that we get for our budget is set. Now, I do have control over that it is a bottom line budget. So I do get to have some flexibility there on where some of that money goes, except for things, like I said, like labor, but I have to make sure that at the end of the year, I don't go over that, what my budget is set at. You'll get to make decisions about where things are at and who are in what positions and where you're going to put your emphasis. As a leader, as a manager, you get to make those choices. I've made those decisions, I've made those choices. Could they be mixed up and done other ways? I suppose, but I believe that what we're doing now is the best service and giving the best service to the citizens of Cowlitz County. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thurman, same question. Since it's a compilation, would you like me to read them again?
No, I think I have them there anyway. Well, for those of us who've lived in Cowlitz County for a number of years, we've gone through the budget cycles of the roller coaster of cuts, and then things get prosperous, and then they kind of income drops, and there's been numerous layoffs through the county during my time there. So, as the sheriff alluded to, certainly personnel issues are the #1 concern. And moving forward, one thing I'd like to see in the future, and I'm speak to, we have one county commissioner here, but I know in the past have kind of cut straight across the board when it came to personnel cuts. I think there needs to be closer scrutiny made when budget cuts are made as to which agencies do get cut, because we've been cut pretty much, they just do a standard percentage across the board, and we've taken some hits, particularly back in 2009 when we had some court security officers. Civilians were laid off to meet the requirements of the budget, and we had to have deputies taken off the road and moved into those positions. And right now we have the equivalent of about 5 full-time, even more, deputy sheriffs doing court security at the Hall of Justice, the Juvenile Center, and now the jail, since they added the 5th Superior Court judge last fall. We have a deputy over there doing security full-time as well. So, and those positions have not been replaced. We were down from prior to 2009, where we were at even deputies serving the road, and quite often we find ourselves with 4 deputies serving Cowlitz County on a shift, which as a shift supervisor and having 4 deputies out there, that's pretty thin. It's kind of, it concerns me at times when we're working that 4 or 5 deputies in a large area to cover. But in terms of reassigning and how I'd assign personnel, in the past several years, the county has added upwards of 60 positions. The sheriff's office last year got 3 positions. We got a deputy sheriff to do court security. We got an administrative sergeant to work in the office, and also a clerk to work in the office. I think 2 of those positions, the office positions, would have been better served by hiring deputy sheriffs. The administrative sergeant position was assigned to redo our policy, which hadn't been looked at in a number of years. In addition, they signed a contract with a California firm who writes policy. So we have a California firm writing policy, send it to our administrative sergeant, who then presents it to our administration. Where in an agency our size, I think we have 5 administrators, and those 5 administrators with probably about 150 years of experience should be able to write the policy and should have kept up on that over the years. That hasn't happened. And even so, not to say this firm from California is bad. I don't think it is. Many agencies use them, but there's no reason why that agency, this company, couldn't provide the policy to the administration to handle that and free up this at least 1 sergeant position to actually work patrol or investigations.
Thank you.
And Ken says I'm done. Thanks.
Mr. Nelson, response or rebuttal to that?
Yeah, if I might just briefly, a couple things. One is that I've managed the sheriff's office through those budget cuts. We were in the midst of, in 2008, 2009, in the midst of those budget cuts when I acquired this job, when I got this job, and have managed the sheriff's office through all of that time, all of those position losses. So, so has that been a challenge? Yes, absolutely. Been a challenge to continue to provide the services to the citizens to the level that they deserve? Yes, absolutely. Would I love to have more? I've asked for it every single year. I've requested additional positions. When you start looking at the county adding 67 new positions in the past few years, and only 2 of those are deputies positions, that's not enough. It is not enough. I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
1 minute.
Is that 1 minute? Okay, I'm sorry. Last year, my request was for 3 deputies positions. As you would expect, I had to give justifications for what it was that I wanted, what it was that I needed, why I needed those positions. So part of those, we're coming up with justifications, reasoning why I needed that extra position. Lexipol is the policy organization that we went with. It is the industry standard for setting policy. It relieves a job or relieves responsibilities from administrators to do things that they need to be doing, and it was a good investment. It is the best investment for the citizens of this county. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thurman, any additional response or rebuttal for a couple minutes?
No.
Okay. Next question will be directed first to Mr. Thurman, and it's also a compilation of a couple of questions regarding schools. How can the Sheriff's Office make schools safer? What about resource officers in our schools?
Well, we've already touched on, it's clear that the Sheriff's Office is understaffed, and when you have 4 deputies on a shift at a time, it doesn't allow time to really dedicate one deputy to a school for any given time. I mean, we do have a program in place where deputies go visit the schools every chance they get, make their presence known. But long term, it's a funding issue. And there's two pieces to that. There's the Sheriff's Office county side of funding deputies. There's also partnerships with the schools. And as we all have followed recently with the school funding, I mean, schools are also scraping the bottom of the barrel for funding for teachers and educational programs as well. So I think the answer to part of that's going to be what's going on up in Toutle. Toutle is up the remote part of the county. They have one campus of a grade school, middle school, and high school, and they've hired a private security firm to be present there on their campus. For them, it's economically more feasible and more realistic approach for them to have somebody there. Or even if we had that deputy assigned there like we have in the past, deputies work 4 days a week, schools in session 5 days a week. Even when we had a deputy assigned there was a day where there wasn't a deputy there, and also that deputy got called away for various things, court, vacation, other things. So even assigning a deputy to a school, 1 deputy per school doesn't mean there's going to be a deputy there all the time. With the private security model, obviously they can guarantee that there's going to be somebody there, an armed person there, during all school hours. So I think that's actually a more fiscally responsible thing for the schools to do. Our part is interacting with the schools best we can. We need to train in the schools like we did here about a month ago. We were up at Castle Rock during the summer when they were out of session. We did training in one of the schools. Got acquainted with that school quite well, and I think there should be more of that, especially during the summer time when the schools are out of session. It would be a good opportunity for deputies to go train, at least walk through the schools and get to know the layout of the schools and interact with some of their administration to address their needs and what their issues are within the schools. The other thing is we'd be exploring grants that are out there that would allow fund officers in the schools for security. I know there's actually talk in the legislature when they go into session to propose several things like that, funding of officers in schools, also some ergonomic things, some security things that can be done with the buildings to make them safer. Some of our school campuses are wide open, which is not real good. So there's I know a plan in the legislature, and hopefully they can come up with some things to help us with that. And that's another thing we could do is just having deputies in the schools consulting on those things, talking about which doors should be locked, when, that sort of thing. And I know one deputy related to me just an idea about having an office space within schools where on their regular patrols they could stop in, have a dedicated desk where they could sit and do their reports. So those are just some ideas that we can do without the current budget situation.
Mr. Nelson, same question. Would you like me to reread them?
Gotcha. So the safety of our students is incredibly important to me, and I know it is to you as well. And that's one of the reasons why in 2016 after one of the school shootings, and we had lost our school resource deputy position, that I ordered the deputies to start visiting the schools within their patrol district every day that they were able. Barring emergencies, I wanted a deputy in their patrol area visiting that school. Since then, we've done over 1,200 school visits. Those are random. The schools very, very much appreciate those visits. They appreciate the fact that the deputies stop there, get out, come in, touch base with the administration, spend a little bit of time at the school as much as they can afford, because they have other duties as well. But this is important. This is incredibly important to all of us, as I know that you know. I recently had a meeting with the new superintendent up at Tootle, Greg McDaniel, a terrific guy. He told me about their school security person. I talked to him about my plan for the school districts to come together and fund a couple of deputies' positions that would actually be school resource deputies and rotate around through the districts. I met with the superintendents last spring as well and kind of tossed this idea out to them. He was excited about that idea. So this is something that I've been working on for some time. I look at the grants every year. I have the grants that are available federally. Look at those every year to see if they will apply for us. And each year there have been issues that have kept us, because most of that money is to help existing programs. There isn't funding out there to start programs. So once we get a program going, there is funding available. Right now, I pass on about $12,000 annually to Longview Police to support their school resource officers program, because we don't have an existing program. So in order to assist them, I mean, I could just make that money go away, but we divert that on to Longview Police. So I've looked at that. Also, we are part of the Safe Schools program, where that is a coalition of schools, law enforcement, that gets together and talks about those very issues of school security, how they can be better hardened and taken care of to keep our kids safe.
Mr. Thurman, any additional comments or rebuttal or response?
Well, the sheriff mentioned the Safe Schools Coalition, and I know there was a drill here several months back down in Kalama, and this was related to me by one of the chiefs of police. They'd been planning for several months. It was a school drill where they simulated an emergency. It was pre-planned with parents, where they bus kids from the school campus to a remote location. Parents pick them up. It's been in planning for many, many months. The sheriff's office administration was not involved in that. 3 chiefs of police were there in the Kalama area. The Kalama chief himself was called out of town and could not be there himself. So chiefs from other agencies were there, but the sheriff's administration wasn't there, and the only uniformed presence was one deputy was sent down the day of this drill, and he didn't know what was going on. They said, take this vehicle, drive down there, drive to the command post and show up. I talked to him later and said, yeah, I didn't know what was going on. They told me to show up, and this was one of our training days, where with pre-planning we could have had a number of deputies there, 5, 6, up to 10 deputies there, depending on the staffing that they could have participated in this drill. So these programs exist, like the Safe School Coalition. They exist. We got to participate. You got to be involved in the planning and get your deputies involved. If something were to happen in Kalama, for example, Kalama generally has 1 officer on. They're going to be calling for backup, and it's the sheriff's office. And just as an aside, the sheriff's office is kind of the backup for all the police agencies in the county. If they need help, they call the sheriff's office. And we go, and they also help us out. But just as an example, I mean, it's good to have programs, but you got to participate in the programs, and you have to get engaged in the pre-planning and get people assigned. And I know in this one example, the schools, it didn't happen. So it's an example of how we need to cooperate better with other agencies, not only law enforcement, but the Safe School Coalition, the schools, and that sort of thing. It's very important as part of school safety to participate in these drills, have more of these drills, to get into the schools, and it's all about protecting our kids.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson, additional comments or rebuttal?
Sure. Just one thing real quick. The Department of Emergency Management, who is part of the Sheriff's Office, works for me. We're engaged with the planning through all of this. I was very, very much aware of what was going on with Kalama. That exercise was specific for relocation for Kalama. They asked for and received a deputy to be there. So it's not quite as it was, my opponent has portrayed this. We were very, very much involved in the process and provided what service was requested. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next question will be directed first at Mr. Nelson. Multitask here. Mental illness and addiction appear to be major problems in the local area. How can the Sheriff's Department help in this area? Do officers need additional training about these issues?
So, mental health and addiction are certainly issues that we face here in our community, and it's a serious issue. We know that. Something that, as a community, we all look at and would like for things to be different, but it's a fact. As far as training for deputy sheriffs, all of our deputies, one of the things that I did was establish some core trainings, some core things that every deputy was going to receive training in. And one of those was the crisis intervention training. So every deputy at the Sheriff's Office goes through 40 hours of crisis intervention training, and I think that we are at 99 or not, if not 100% of our deputies that have all been trained in crisis intervention, the crisis intervention training, to deal with people who are mentally, who are in critical mental state or suffering from some kind of issues. As far as the drug issues that are facing our community, we all know that those things continue to face us, and we look at the opioid issues, we look at the cocaine issues, we look at the methamphetamine issues, and our ability to address those at a street level is somewhat hampered, of course, again, by staffing and the amount of people that we have available. A few things quickly. I serve on the narcotics, Cowlitz Narcotics Task Force Executive Board, the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Executive Board. I've participated in the opioid summits here that we have done as a panelist, spoken on these issues in the past in the community, and they're important things. Is there an answer, a single answer? No. Law enforcement is not the answer. Education is not the answer. Treatment is not the answer. Prevention is not the answer. But the community is the answer. And what we do together, and that's what we're working on and continue to work on to address these issues, because it is the combination of all of those things that's going to make a difference here in Cowlitz County. Not just on the enforcement side, because we have to look at all of this, and that's the job of the sheriff, is to look at this on a collective, community-wide level, not just on the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thurman, same question.
Well, thank you. Well, yes, mental illness and addiction, and also throw in the homeless situation, really all intersect. Many of the people that are homeless, they have addictions, there's mental illness, and there's multi-things that they're dealing in their life that create these situations. In terms of law enforcement's response to the drug crisis and situation, I think it's twofold. One is we have law enforcement. We need to enforce the laws. We need to hold people accountable if they're breaking the laws. And even once you do that, even if they're charged, there's still help for them available. There's a drug court program which has a great deal of success. Even those who are convicted, whether it be for misdemeanors or felonies, there's drug programs available to them within the system, whether it be incarcerated or if it's on their part of their probation, they can receive treatment And that's part of the answer for dealing with addiction there is, from a law enforcement perspective, is holding people accountable. That's what it comes down to. The other part of that is on the individual themselves to seek treatment. There are programs available through DSHS and many community-based 12-step programs. Really, individuals need to take the first step themselves to get help. Sometimes law enforcement can help that by making an arrest, getting them into the program. Other times, people should be able to do it themselves. Another aspect for law enforcement in the drug issue is going to be, community caretaking. That's when people are overdosed, and we do have a program where we carry Narcan now. We've been trained in using that, and there's been at least 2 occasions where deputies have used this Narcan to assist people who are overdosing and help save their lives. So we do have that role to get in an immediate situation to get people medical help, save their lives, and again, that gets them into the system to get help. And like I said, the other part of it is the law enforcement part of it, and addressing people who are violating the crime, not only the street level dealers all the way up to the top, people who are bringing this into our community. That'd be a key point that I'd like to do as sheriff, and start a proactive team to address these issues. And currently we only have 1 officer in the drug task force, which is a small percentage of our manpower. We have about 39 deputies and sergeants. Other agencies have about 10% of their agency involved in proactive activities, like Longview street crimes, and that's about 10% of their manpower are assigned to these issues on the street, drugs and affiliated theft and burglaries and identity theft that occurs. And that's what I'd like to do, is bump up the numbers of people in the sheriff's office addressing this. Right now we're like a dog chasing its tail around in a circle. There's a lot of activity, but we're not getting anywhere. We're not addressing the source of the problem. And that's what a street crimes unit like in Longview, they go throughout the county actually investigating cases because there's a vacuum. Other agencies just aren't addressing it. And they've had great success. I'd like to replicate that with the sheriff's office, get a proactive team going, not just be reactive to 911 calls, but actually get some people out there looking at the source of the problem and addressing the source.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman. I see your time is up. Any additional comments or response?
Yes, thank you. So in the last year, I've done 6 town halls throughout the county. 3 in the North County, 3 here in the local area. These town halls have been open to the communities to talk about drug education, prevention, and treatment. Basically give an opportunity to have this discussion of what do we do. I want to just quickly say that we do a great job as far as with what we have, doing the job that we can that's out there. The Drug Task Force is the only drug enforcement unit that serves Kalama, Kelso, Woodland, Castle Rock, and unincorporated Cowlitz County. Longview is the only agency that has its own separate unit that does drugs and other crimes. So our role in that, not only do we have a detective assigned there, but we also manage, we have the commander of that unit, we manage all of the evidence, we do the fiscal portion of that, so we have a tremendous investment in the sheriff's office in our drug task force. I was able to obtain all of that Narcan through a grant that I got through the high intensity drug trafficking area, which I serve on the board of. I obtained a grant to get Narcan, not only for the sheriff's office, but offered it to all the other agencies within Cowlitz County, some of which took that and some of which did not. We also have a very active canine, narcotics canine. When our first canine retired, I invested in buying another dog, training that dog, and putting that dog to work out on the road doing narcotics investigations, in addition to regular patrol work. But we have a narcotics dog that is available and working throughout the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thurman, response, rebuttal?
I guess in my earlier response I didn't touch on the issue of mental illness, but I think as you all know, if you follow things in the paper, there's limited resources for mental health It's even very difficult to get serious criminal offenders into Western State Hospital to be evaluated for criminal cases, let alone a lot of the local people. It's more a community-based system, so we deal with these people on a regular basis, the mentally ill, and it is a challenge for us. And our local resource is, there's several resources. One is St. John's Emergency Room. We wind up taking a lot of people there. And there's also the local mental health community has teams that put together here recently that respond out to the scene on less serious cases, which has been very helpful. So there are programs in place. The best we can do is manage it in the short term in law enforcement, make sure that people are safe. That's part of the community caretaking role, getting them either to St. John's or getting the local mental health community to come to the scene to assist and help people, which they've been very responsive in doing. But it continues to be a challenge for us, along with, like I said, it goes along hand in hand with the homeless issue. Many of these people have mental health issues that aren't being treated. And the best we can do for them is, like I said, the community caretaking role and try to get them help if and when we're called and find them in a situation where they need help. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question will be directed first to Mr. Thurman. What training, experience, or other skills do you have in management and executive leadership?
Well, I've been a supervisor for like many years, a sergeant. Before that, I was a field training officer. We've also mentioned I've conducted background investigations. So many of the people in the department have either supervised, trained them, or did a background investigation on them, which prior to hire, you get to know them and their families and that sort of thing. So I have a personal relationship with most of the department based on that. I've also gone to supervisory, and I've also completed the state criminal training justice academy mid-level management training program for mid-level managers, which covered like budgeting and that sort of thing. So I do have that experience. And I'd just like to add to that, in addition to the relationship I have with many of the deputies and the role I played in the union, I was involved in contract negotiations for many years, which address the way that we work between management and the union. I was on the other side of the table, but was very instrumental in negotiating contracts, and also as president was involved in many disciplinary actions as well with deputies, worked with the administration and our attorney. So in many of these issues, in terms of management, the county has a budget office, and they also have a human resource office, which is basically available to all county agencies to use. I know our administration relies on them for assistance with the budget and also with personnel issues, because people within our office, law enforcement officers, they're not experts in budgets or with disciplinary or human resource issues. So we rely on them. They have experts in the field at the disposal. So as sheriff, I'd rely on them very much in terms of budgetary and human resource issues, and also rely on my experience in training and personnel issues. And from a fiscal standpoint, I can just hold up my own personal experience, my personal life, to being very fiscally conservative and responsible, and I expect government to be fiscally conservative and responsible, and that's why I'd manage the office, would be very fiscally conservative and make sure that the resources are being spent correctly, addressing the issues of the community.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson, same question.
Well, I guess I have, as far as training and experience and in management and leadership, throughout my entire career. Starting off as a reserve deputy, I was promoted, appointed as a reserve sergeant, and then ended up as the assistant chief of the reserve unit. When I got into law enforcement and came to the sheriff's office, I spent a couple of years as a deputy and then went into our special services division. When I got out of there, I was promoted to sergeant through a competitive process. Promoted to sergeant, where I served for a couple of years on patrol, and then was assigned to detectives. And I served as the detective sergeant for 4 years before being selected by the sheriff to take the role of the patrol captain's position as part of the sheriff's administration, where I managed the patrol division. So as opposed to managing a handful of guys, it was managing the entire patrol division. I served in that capacity, got my certificates both in supervisory, mid-management, served in that capacity for 7 years before becoming the sheriff, and I've twice been elected as the CEO executive of the sheriff's office. Been through the Lower Columbia Leadership Academy, graduate, past president of that executive board, Northwest Law Enforcement Command College graduate, National Sheriff's Institute. Probably one of the greatest things that personally for me, professionally, besides being twice elected by the citizens of this county, which is probably the greatest honor that could ever be bestowed upon somebody, was being elected as the sheriff of the Washington State Sheriff's Association to represent every sheriff in the 39 county, 38 plus Cowlitz, 38 other counties of the state of Washington, and have now again been elected to the executive board of the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. All of those things, I think, show, of course, show management, executive experience, trust, great honor to serve in those capacities, and so I'm not sure. I guess that's about all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments or response, Mr. Thurman?
Yes. I just like to add a couple things. When I too graduated from the Lower Columbia Leadership Academy a number of years ago, which was a great program that they had. I've completed that course. In addition, I already mentioned my labor union involvement, being elected president and vice president numerous times in that position. And I will add, as part of my process of deciding to run, I did consult with my peers and was overwhelmingly supported and encouraged to run by the people that I work with, the members of the Guild, and then they formalize that with an endorsement from the Guild. I'm also the chairman of the local Republican Party, which was an election process too by approximately 72 precincts in the county, and precinct committee officers. I was elected to that position here about a year and a half ago, which showed, I think, the competence of those folks. And I will add, I am running as a Republican, Mark's running as a Democrat. I don't think partisan politics really play much of a role in this position of sheriff or actually any of the county offices. However, it's just, I felt that I needed to should run as a Republican, and based on that, I'm a Republican because I believe we should have fiscally conservative, fiscally responsible government, and we should limit government's role in people's lives. Particularly, I'll asked quite often about the Second Amendment. I think we have enough gun laws now. We just need to have resources to enforce our current laws and that sort of thing. So, anyway, overall, I don't think partisan politics should play a role in this, but I am elected as the chairman and serve in that capacity. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson, additional comments or response?
Sure. I'll just say this, working with the Sheriff's Office budget over the last 9 years, you darn well better be fiscally conservative. We have not had a whole lot of budget to work with, so I'll let that one stay at that. You want to mention the Second Amendment? I'm a life member of the NRA. I know some of that make you happy, some of you might not. But I've always enjoyed and participated in firearms sports, and believe in that it is my role, my job as an elected official to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States as it stands. That's what I swore to do. I cannot take a position otherwise, I do not believe. By the way, I'm also published in my position on that, not only in our local news, but in national firearms magazines. So I think my position on that is very, very clear. That's what I believe. That's who I am. It's part of who we are as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question will go to Mr. Nelson first, and again, it's a compilation. We have a lot of material, so I'm trying to get through as many as we can. This might be a little bit of a stretch, but it's somewhat similar. What are your thoughts on the Sheriff's Department running to the county jail? Do you support the independence of the 911 system? What is your vision of how 911 will operate in conjunction with multiple emergency response agencies?
Okay, that's a fun one. So, the jail, interestingly, you know, and I have to go back years ago. I can remember my dad. He started off as a jailer, working in the jail very, very frequently, working in the jail, and he loved working the jail. He loved the jail part of the sheriff's office, and I can remember hearing stories about him going in, sit there, smoke his pipe, drink a cup of coffee with the guys on the weekends, and that was something that he loved to do. In 1989, the jail separated from the county. The jail budget went up 40% the next year, by the way, but the jail separated from the sheriff's office and became a separate department within Cowlitz County, and has been ever since. So a lot of those guys that worked in the jail and such, they've since retired. We don't really have anybody now that is trained to work in the jail. We have a good jail staff. We have an excellently run jail now. If you want to talk about whether or not it should continue to be or should be run under the sheriff, I've said this before. I've been saying it for the last several years, and I'll continue to say it. If you want to have the discussion, I'm perfectly willing to sit down and have the discussion. In the end, what's important is that it's what's best for the citizens of Cowlitz County. So if it is something that is agreed to and is best for the citizens of Cowlitz County, that the jail be run by the sheriff, so be it. It is in most of the counties across the state. However, we have a good director. We've got really good people there, and a good organization. I don't necessarily see the benefit of changing that right now. I'd have to be convinced that that was something that was going to be best for the sheriff's office and for the citizens. As far as 911 goes, that horse has left the barn. That is happening. The 911 Public Authority, which I'm part of the board on that, is in progress. We expect that to be up and running within the next few months. We've hired an executive director. Former Longview Fire Chief Phil Jermu is the new director of 911, and that's going to be up and running. I think we're all working very, very well together, and I expect to see that be a very positive thing for the citizens of Cowlitz County.
Thank you. Same question, Mr. Thurman? Or questions? You want me to reread those?
What was the last part about multi-agencies or?
I'll just read it. What are your thoughts on the Sheriff's Department running the county jail? Do you support the independence of the 911 system? What is your vision of how 911 will operate in conjunction with multiple emergency response agencies?
Okay. Well, first, the 911 new authority, I do support that. I think it's a good thing for many of the agencies. I think it'll be a more fair and balanced representation, and they'll have their concerns addressed more directly with an independent body like that. And they currently serve many different agencies already, law enforcement and fire agencies, and also interact with the AMR, private ambulance service that is used throughout some cities in the county as well. So I think with Phil Jermu, a great deal of experience going in there, I think we're going to see some positive changes, not only in management, but also in moving to a new physical location. Currently they're in the basement of the Hall of Justice, which is kind of in a floodplain, and potentially, and also there's no windows. It's kind of almost like probably a mushroom growing factory or a cave down there where they work. So I think they do at least 12-hour shifts down there, and those people are very dedicated. They're the backbone of public safety, quite frankly. A lot of talented people, and I think they deserve better. And hopefully with this new authority, they will get better working conditions, and I think it'll be a good thing. As far as the jail goes, the sheriff threw out some facts there, which is the way it is. We have a private, not a private, but it's a civilian corrections model. It's been that way for many years. And the sheriff's office doesn't have really a culture of corrections like many sheriff's offices through the state do. In many agencies, it's a place where people start as corrections officers and can work their way up into other positions in law enforcement. That does happen to a certain extent here with us in our jail. We do have many corrections officers who have crossed over to be law enforcement officers, but in terms of addressing the sheriff's office taking over the jail, I think if you've followed the local news, there has been some challenges and issues in corrections, and it goes along, I guess, with the clientele. They don't get to pick the clients they serve who come in the door, so they get all the ills of society wind up in the jail, and it leads to a lot of issues. But what I would suggest is, after all these many years, I don't really know that it's really been evaluated. I think you should bring in some outside people, look at the situation, and see if there's improvements that can be made to the current system, or if it'd be better going back to a sheriff grant system. I'd certainly be open to that, particularly if we looked at the fiscal side of things. As the sheriff mentioned, once the civilian department took over, the budget went way up, staffing went way up, and that sort of thing. So I think we need to look at that, see if it can be fiscally managed better than it currently is with the civilian model versus the sheriff grant model. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nelson, additional thoughts?
If I might, on the 911 issue, as far as them being in the basement, they didn't start out there. They started upstairs where there was light and windows. They did get moved down into the basement. I'll tell you that we have had 2 500-year floods since they've been down there, and they're all still there. They're all still alive, but it's not a great place, not an optimum place, and we are looking at other locations. So that's a great thing. With the, I mean, that's one of the things that we're working on, is finding that place that we're going to move them to. Touch one last thing on the jail, if I might. I'm not looking for more work, just so you know. 80% roughly of a sheriff's time, for those who are doing corrections, who are working, who have a jail, sheriffs who have a jail, about 80% of their time is spent dealing with corrections related issues. Now, I know that because I work with these guys and I talk to them all the time, and it is a nightmare for them. They're continually struggling with those issues. So honestly, like I said, there's a handful of sheriffs across the state who do not run the jail. And that's like the 5 or 6 of us that are sitting in the back of the room smiling at the sheriff's meetings, because we're not having to deal with those. I'm kidding. I love those guys over there. They're great people. They're hard-working county employees. And like I said, if it is a topic that we need to discuss and that the community would like for us to discuss, I'm more than happy to sit down and have the discussion and see what's going to be best for the citizens of this county and for the Cowlitz County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you. Mr. Thurman, additional thoughts, comments on that issue?
Oh, no, I'll pass.
Okay.
Move along.
I think we might be able to sneak in a couple in here. I believe the next one will go to Mr. Thurman first. Who was your greatest mentor? How did that person affect your law enforcement career?
Well, that's a good question. It's hard to select just one, but I had to pick one. It's my current supervisor, Charlie Rosenzweig. He's been my supervisor for actually over half my career. If I added up the numbers, probably close to about 18 years. But he's inspired, encouraged me to seek training, seek additional responsibility. But he was my supervisor when I was a detective sergeant, when we investigated, homicides. He's always there asking, what do you need in terms of resources, people, training, and that sort of thing. He's always there to support not me, but people working with me to make sure we get the job done. And he's been very inspirational to me in that regard, and very supportive, and for those reasons. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Mr. Nelson, same question.
Well, I have many. Some of them are in this room. One of them, my brother, back here, who retired after 35 years with Kelso Police Department as 9 years as their chief. my father, whom I got to grow up seeing him give of himself and his life and his caring to this community. If you want to talk about a mentor and somebody who is the quintessential public servant, I can't really go much further than outside of my own family. I have seen men and women in this business over the years who are good, honorable, sacrifice, serve their community people. And there are tons of them that I look at and grew up with and have worked with and have spent my career with, some of them literally in the mud and the blood and the beer. And then those beyond that, those people who have retired. Some of them, of course, the people that we have now, that we're hiring now, are good people. We work really hard. I work really, really hard to make sure that we are getting the best people that we can possibly afford as deputy sheriffs to serve the citizens of this county. That's one of my responsibilities, and it is incredibly important to me. We go through a very, very thorough background process. The guys work hard to make sure that those backgrounds are done, that they're vetted through, that they are taken care of. We then interview, I interview, and in the end, hire the best people that I absolutely can get my hands on to serve us. And that's not the end. Now, we've got, of course, lots of training that goes on beyond that, but this was about mentors, and I got to tell you again, the two greatest, my father and my brother. I couldn't look for two more honorable men to follow after. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thurman, any additional thoughts, comments?
Sure. I certainly respect Mark and his family's service. It's very exemplary, and I guess I'd be remiss not to recognize my wife. She's one of my biggest supporters, and she too served 30 years in law enforcement as a clerk, corrections, worked for the State Patrol as a commercial vehicle officer, and completed her 20 years as a deputy, and including some time as chief civil deputy. So she's been an inspiration, a big support to me as well. So like I said, I'd be remiss not to recognize her support and throughout my career as well. She's been very supportive. We raised 3 sons, and we were working for most of that time opposite chefs. So when I was working, she was mom, and when she was working, I was mom. And dad both. So it has been a challenge, but I have 1 son in the room tonight, and I'm proud of all my sons. So what they've done in terms of membership or mentorship, I've had many. I selected 1, and I've learned from very many. But one of the highlights of my career, I think, when it's all said and done, I'm going to be able to look back. And for me, I'm going to take personal pride in the people that I've been able to train and pass on the information that others that came before instilled in me and led from them. And I see one gentleman out in the hallway there, Bob Covington, is out there. He's hiding back there. But Bob, when I first started, I was on the team with him and learned a lot from him and many others. And it's just been a real pleasure for me to continue on and pass on that information to younger deputies, and hopefully when I'm gone, walk out the door, that part of me and part of what my work will live on through them. So thank you.
Thank you. Any additional comments on that mentor question?
Nope. Thank you.
I really needed to get to a couple more questions, but I'm respectful of time. We're at 8 o'clock, so I think we'll move to closing statements. First up, Mr. Thurman, you have 3 minutes for a closing statement.
Well, once again, thanks for coming, and I hope this has been informative for everybody and somewhat enjoyable. So I'd just like to say that really what this election is about, it's about the next 4 years and even beyond, the future of the Sheriff's Office, the future of the quality of life of Cowlitz County. When, companies look to come and invest in a location, they look at various things. One is public safety, look at the schools, they look at the medical community and that sort of thing. And I think to really put our best foot forward and provide a better quality of life for everybody in the community, public safety has to be a big part of that equation. And I think we do public safety best when our agencies work together collectively to provide a seamless response to crime situations. Bad guys don't respect geographical borders, and law enforcement, we have to work well together too. And I think by and large we do. So that's going to be the challenge ahead. We have a dynamic changing society. It changes more and more every day, as I've seen through my 30-year career. I mentioned the computers and that sort of thing. We have to be responsive to that. And like I said, I think I alluded to when I first made my opening statement, before running or even deciding to run, I went around, I spoke to my coworkers, spoke to agency heads, elected officials, who all felt that the sheriff's office needed a new direction, new leadership. And that's why I stepped forward to offer that. And I appreciate the support of my peers, many are here today, and a lot of community support as well. So moving forward, this is a people's position, as all elected positions are. And I think we need to look at the position, consider the future of the community and what direction they want their government, and in this case, the law enforcement and public safety aspect, to move forward. I pledge as sheriff to be responsive to the community, be listening to them, also input from other chiefs in the local area. Many of them have a great deal of experience, which I could learn from, and we could learn from, and work well together moving forward. And also listen to the people out working the street to deal with the people. Some of the problems we've alluded to tonight, the homeless issue, mental health, drug issues. We need to listen to those who've been out there on the street actually interacting with these people, and that's what I've done throughout my career. I've been an investigator, always investigated crimes. I haven't had an administrative office job. I've been the one out there talking to people, knowing issues on the street, and I think that's what we need in a leadership position as a sheriff, is somebody who is tuned in to what's going on, not up in Olympia or other places doing things there, but aware and in touch with their local community and being responsive to them. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman. Mr. Nelson, closing statement, please.
Well, the future is here today. Today's all we've got. And I've been doing this job and serving this community for over 4 decades. But the last 9 years, I've been doing this job as your sheriff. Once appointed, twice elected. It's probably the greatest honor that I have ever had. I deal with people every single day in our community. It is because of dealing with those people and the issues of our community that takes me, in my role as the sheriff, representing you, to places like Olympia to deal with our legislators, to talk to our legislators, or to Washington, D.C. to take the issues that we are facing here in Cowlitz County to policymakers in our nation's capital, which, by the way, I've been invited to go back again to here in a week to a briefing at the White House. The truth is that we work together. The truth is that local law enforcement works together. We do every day at a street level. We even do at that administrative level. We communicate with one another. It does happen. I'm here to ask for your support and your vote. Not for, again, not for what has happened yesterday, but for what we're doing today and the differences that today makes. Because you know what? Today is all we have. Quickly, how much time do I have, Ken?
About a minute.
You can't hear me. About a minute? Okay, thank you. So, there was a lady who lost her daughter recently to a drug overdose. Her vow from that point, and she did this at one of my town halls, said that she was going to vow to make a difference because she recognized the issues that were happening in her community, and she wanted to make a difference. And that's what we ask of our public servants. That's what my job is. That's what my role is, to make a difference every single day. I have a plan. There's a future. I have a good foundation. I've got great people. And again, I am here to ask for your support and your vote for another 4 years as your sheriff. Please vote for Mark Nelson. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, I would like to thank, first of all, Mark Nelson and Brad Thurman for their excellent job answering questions. Appreciate very much the attendance tonight. It's phenomenal attendance.